Hi students, welcome to another week of Plant ID. As you hopefully know, we are about to have exam number 2. So in this video, I am going to go through some possible questions, examples of what might be on the exam. We'll go through some examples, some terminology, and I'll give you some study tips. So let's get into that now, because I know a common question for exams is, how do I study for this? Now, y'all already have one exam under your belt, so maybe you've already got this down. Maybe you already know what to expect, but I want to give you my tips and tricks anyway. So towards the beginning of this class in one of the laboratories, I recommended creating a table type document to organize all of your plant families. Some of you probably didn't take that excellent advice, but that's okay. You can take that advice now. It's better to start now than never. So again, I really just think that this is a really good method to keep track of all the similarities and differences between all of these plant families, because we're learning a whole lot. And having this set out in front of you in a table, I just think is really, really helpful. So tip number 1, if you haven't already created this document, please create it. And if you have created it, be sure to fill it out and get all of the relevant information on it before exam number 2. I want to remind people that in Module 11, there is a folder that says Exam 2 Study Materials. In that folder is a glossary, which I'll talk about in just a moment, but also this plant families document. Those are all the families that will be covered on the exam. So try and have all those families integrated into your family document, like the example I have on screen. So just going over this format here, there are a million ways to do it. This makes sense for my mind. Whatever makes sense for you is the best option. So first off, I have the family, Rosaceae as an example, or the roses, their habit, shrubs, herbs, trees, it's variable. I always think it's useful to list the floral formula, but in the case of the Rosaceae, there are multiple floral types. So I make sure to list all the different types of formulas that exist within this family, and also just some notes about them so I can keep them straight in my mind. Some more floral traits. They're actinomorphic. They mostly have a notable hypanthium. I have our leaf traits. It's also good to reference what type of fruits that they produce. Some notable examples. I always like doing this because I think that it helps me remember what family we're talking about here. And then just any other details that I think are useful to have. I also suggest if you want to put pictures in this document, that's super helpful too. Really, whatever works best for you is the best option, because this is just for you and for your own practice and organization. So tip number 2, let's get on to that. I mentioned a glossary document in that exam prep folder. So that's what it looks like here. And these are all the terms that you could potentially be quizzed on this exam. I highly suggest downloading this, printing it off, doing whatever you want to do, and defining each of these glossary terms. I think that you'll probably already know a lot of them on this list. But if there's one you don't know, maybe go back to the video where it was introduced. These are ordered in the order that they were presented, so you can go back and find them that way. And make sure you're familiar with these. So for example, the third one on this list, banner, wings, and keel. So those are the types of petals on flowers from the legume family. Be sure that you know what those are. Perhaps if you were to receive some type of figure, you could label up those different types of petals. just an example. And then tip number 3, I say just use this video to help you in your studies. If you want, you can watch this video right now and just get an idea of what type of questions might be asked, or maybe you can evaluate where you're at currently with your knowledge. Or maybe you want to study first, come back to this later, and usually, actually use it as like a final test of your knowledge. Make sure you're ready to go into that exam. Again, whatever works for you is the best way to do it. If you do want to test your knowledge, though, I would highly suggest pausing. I'll have a couple of questions that I'll pose to y'all, and I will give you a little pause to think about it, but I'll go pretty quick to make this video not too long. So pause the video if you need time to think about anything. Remember, the exam is no open notes. So if you need to look up anything real quick, make sure that your notes are organized, what have you, feel free to pause. Those are my main study tips. So let's get into our questions here. Question number 1, we'll start off a little silly here. So imagine your sweetheart is picking you up for dinner and brings you this flower and says, "Here, sweetheart, I have brought you a bouquet." And then hands you this. Are they right? 1 sunflower equals a bouquet? Well, technically, if you define a bouquet as an arrangement of flowers, yeah, technically that sunflower is in fact a bouquet, because sunflowers are a part of the Asteraceae family. And their flowers are not really a singular flower. Instead, what we see as like the flower head is actually an inflorescence composed of hundreds of different flowers. 2 types of flowers in there. There are the central disc flowers, like you would see right here, and then the exterior ray flowers, which have what we would consider a petal on it. And with many, many ray flowers, you get what looks like, just your average single flower. Let's see, the Asteraceae, it's extremely common. And I know a lot of y'all have collected asters for your plant collections project. So it's one that would not be, if you wanted to go back and review aster, that would not be a bad idea, because there are just simply so many modified and unique floral parts in this family. Also, if you wanted to include a diagram in your plant family document, that's not a bad idea either, because you're just having to keep track of a lot of structures that don't really appear in any other families. Let's move on. Question number 2. Imagine that you are walking through the Front Range of Colorado and you see this little plant. It's a few feet tall, pretty erect, pretty leafy. The leaves, you notice, are simple and they do not have any stipulates. And being the good little botanist you are, you happen to have brought your hand lens out on your hike. And so you investigate the structures at the top of that plant and you see these tiny little flowers. Move my face here. You see these tiny little flowers. And from what you can tell, they don't have any petals. And you also notice in your hand lens what is on the leaf there. All that, those little white flakes, they are like unique pubescents. I think you should have all the information you need to tell me what family this particular plant is in. Do you have any guesses? It is in the Chenopodiaceae family. So this is Chenopodium album, called white goosefoot. The pubescence that I mentioned earlier, this is a pubescence that is pretty unique to this family. It is called Theranos pubescent or mealy. It really does feel very mealy when you touch it. Also, just note that there's another type of more unique pubescence in this family, which is called scurfy, and that describes a scaly pubescence. Note that though this is from the Cuneifortiaceae, there's, taxonomy is in flux, and so it's also sometimes merged with the Amaranthaceae. Keep that in mind. For question 3, I'm not going to give you too many hints. I am just going to let you observe these flowers for just a moment, and you can tell me what family they are in. Hopefully they look familiar because they're one of my favorites. These are in the Apocynaceae family, and these are both examples of the milkweed flower or the Asclepias. And so I want to do a little bit of terminology quizzing here. So the flowers that you see on the left here, as you might be able to tell, they are highly modified. The petals are actually pointing downwards in this flower. And there are a lot of other unique structures that are super cool. So let's go through some of those. Let's go with what I have covered up right now in the red box here. What is this arrow, this bracket? What is this bracket indicating here? What is the name of this structure? Give me a second. So this structure sitting above the petals is called the corona. I believe that term is, or that word is derived from the word crown, which makes sense. It does look like a little crown above, on top of these petals. Let's go for the blue box next. And specifically, that blue box is indicating the structure straight down from it in the center. If that's not clear enough, the structure that I'm thinking of in my mind is the combination of the reproductive structures in this flower. If you think you've got it, it is called the gynostegium. That is just the merging of the androecium, the gynoecium, and so it's all one structure in the center of this flower. And then last up, we have the structures to the very right in this diagram. Some of y'all might be able to recognize them outright without any hints. If you need one hint, I will tell you it is for pollination and dispersal of pollination. Pollen, that's what I mean, dispersal of pollen. So that structure right there is called the pollineum. Each of those little lobes here is a pollinia, together pollineum. And those are the structures that get hooked on to the feet of different pollinators. And so as those pollinators move through the flowers, go flying from flower to flower, those will get sprayed and deposited. Just another method of pollination. So cool. We will make this the last question for this video. So on another hike, you notice this pretty big, beautiful flower. It is bilabia, which remember means two lips. To me, kind of looks like an open mouth. You will also notice on further inspection that there are 4 stamens. 2 of them are noticeably shorter than the other 2. And you also know that the stem is round and the leaves are arranged opposite one another. I'll give you a second to make a guess as to what this flower, which family this flower belongs to. If you guessed the Plantaginaceae family, you are correct. So this is a beautiful penstemon flower. And I want to point something out. There was a reason why I mentioned that the stem is round. And that's because the Plantaginaceae and the Laminaceae family share a lot of those floral traits. But remember that Laminaceae have a very square stem, and that's quite a noticeable trait when you're in the field. And a couple of follow-up questions with some terminology. So I noticed, or I mentioned earlier, that there were 4 stamen, 2 long and 2 short. What is the term for this? That term is didenymous. If you have 2 long, 2 short stamen, you have didenymous stamen. And last, so let's see, you may have noticed that there's a lot going on with this flower. But in your investigation of this flower, you have found the female structures, the male structures. You can see the purple tip stamen here. And then in the center, that is going to be your stigma. And so that is the male and female structures accounted for. So what is this thing sticking down the middle? What is the name of that structure? Bonus points if you know what it's for. That structure is called a staminode. So that is like a false stamen. It is sterile, and it likely evolved to increase pollination success and efficiency. It will slow down pollinators, so they're forced to spend more time in the flower, either picking pollen up or possibly depositing pollen. All right, those are all the questions I have for y'all today. But now's a good time to kind of check in with yourself. You know, did that information, did it feel familiar? Was that, you know, did you hear some things you've never heard before? Check in with yourself, figure out if you want to do a little bit more studying or if you feel prepared. Be sure to let Erica or I know if you've got any questions about the material, the structure of the exam. If you have any concerns or you want a little bit more help on how to study, please let us know. And best of luck, y'all. Have a good one.